Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this great opportunity to share some ideas with you and hopefully get some feedback on them as well. I want to start and end with what I think is a core underlying theme, which is something along the lines of, in something as complex as a higher education ecosystem, we need structures, social structures for social learning. And without those, I think we actually lose an awful lot of the potential for harnessing and harvesting the enormous diversity of views on creativity and how it actually manifests itself across very diverse contexts within higher education. There's a background paper and slides if you want to follow up there, and I'll put that up again, that link, later on. I'm not a typical academic, so I want to sort of reveal a little bit of why I believe what I've just said. I go back to 1998 when I was working at the Quality Assurance Agency, and I was working on policies which were encouraging higher education to essentially move down the line of a learning outcomes model. And in looking at lots and lots of program designs, including some from Cambridge, it sort of struck me that we were missing out on developmental outcomes related to creativity. Well, that was sort of a little bit of dissatisfaction in my mind, but I then moved to the Learning Teaching Support Network when it was set up in 2000, and I was given a blank sheet of paper to actually start working on something which I thought had developmental potential. And I thought of curriculum, because that seemed to be under-researched and under, as far as practice was concerned, bringing people together around that idea, and also creativity. And we created a network called the Imaginative Curriculum Network, and over 4 or 5 years, we held numerous events, we did all sorts of surveys, we commissioned research, and the net effect of all that was a body of knowledge around how creativity was being perceived, conceptualized, problematized, and used in higher education. And that book, Developing Creativity, was the result of that work. I then moved on to University of Surrey, where I was director of a settle, and there we were looking at ways in which we might recognize and value and support students' informal learning. And that led us down the track of a concept of life-wide learning. So we tried to develop the concept, apply it in a practical sort of way. And within that, we did research on students' notions of creativity and where they thought they were creative. Well, unfortunately, many of them felt that they weren't creative in their academic programs. But what they did do was find spaces outside their programs where they could represent themselves in a creative way. So that was, if you like, a reframing of the problem for me. And then I left in 2011 and set up, wanted to keep working with these ideas, life-wide education as a hub and networking agent, and then more recently creative academic in the same way. So in a sense, I learned the value and the power of networks to harvest and share knowledge back in like early 2000s. And I'm now trying to reproduce that in some way, albeit with all the modern technologies that we've got. Also, okay, so the problem of creativity is quite a complex problem. And we worked through many of the dimensions, but the way we came to see it was, it's clearly not a chronic problem. If you ask academics in higher education, they will say there's no problem with creativity, we do it all the time, which they do. It's there all the time. It's actually embedded in and subsumed within all the sort of critical thinking that goes on. So the problem, the way we position the problem was, it's an affordance. It's an affordance to do so much more than we currently do, to create a better version of higher education, if you like, by pursuing work within that area. And to me, to my mind, the fundamental problem that we're grappling with in higher education is how we prepare learners for an unknowable world, a world not just their first job, which we can do pretty well, but a world in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time. And that's the world, I think, which requires all our resourcefulness, all our creativity. And Anna, if I make my little tribute to Anna, quite rightly pointing out that this notion of creativity being a useful resourcefulness that we need when we try to deal with all the complexity around us in our lives. And Anna did contribute to this book and introduced me to the concept of life-wide. So I wanted to introduce three concepts. The first one, Lifewide. To me, it's the most holistic notion of learning because it embraces all forms of learning in an ever-unfolding present, because we're occupying all these different spaces and involved in all these different experiences. So formal and informal, intended and unanticipated, need and interest-driven. Clearly, if we map out our lives, we can find 4, 5, 6, 7 different distinct spaces, environments in which we're learning and having experience on a day-to-day basis. And our learning, our development and achievement, and our creativity as part of that are contained within these different spaces. They manifest themselves in different ways. So although we carry with us a set of characteristics that enable us to engage in creative ways, the manifestation of that is very different according to the spaces which we occupy. So that's the first point I want to make, that there's a link between learning, development, achievement, and our creative achievement, and the spaces and environments in which we are performing. The second concept, I've been very influenced by the work of Carl Rogers, and his representation of creativity as something that grows from the circumstances of our lives as we interact with the things in our lives, as we work with and care about the problems that we're dealing with, which makes it an inherently unique thing, because we bring certain things which are unique to us. We think of things in certain ways in a unique way, and so the products of that thinking and action are, if you like, our unique contributions to the world. So an ecological perspective on personal creativity is very important. I should also point out that when we did our research at Surrey, academics hold lots of different conceptions of creativity. They work with them, and they manage to work with them quite happily. But I'm highlighting this one as something which is very important to my way of thinking. So we take that ecological concept now into learning, the idea of learning ecologies. Most of us, every day of our life, are building what I call learning ecologies. They are an attempt for us to engage in the world around us, to harvest the resources that are there, the relationships we can make, in order to achieve something. But teachers also create learning ecologies, ecologies within which their students, pupils learn. I love this picture because it conveys so much joy of the experience of learning and the passion of the teacher trying to engage her students. When you pull this apart and you see what's in that picture, you see the teacher with her pupils, so people and maybe teaching assistants and maybe parents in this ecology. You see purpose, that teacher has a purpose, a desire, an intent. You see the context, earlier school, you see the affordances in there. What the teacher is doing is creating affordance for those kids to learn, helping them see that affordance and then realize it because they have the capability to do so. She's determining content in this case and process, and she's going to be aware of the sorts of achievements that are happening in there. The space is there, clearly physical space, but there's all sorts of spaces in there, emotional, intellectual spaces as well. And all the resources, it's full of resources in there. So those children don't need the teacher sometimes, they just pick up things and learn through the fact that they're messing around with stuff. That, to my mind, is a very rich learning ecology. If we extract the core principles from there, these are the key features of that ecology. There is a past. The teacher and the students bring to that ecology everything that they know and can do in that particular situation. The ecology is created by a person, in this case the teacher we've just seen, to achieve some sort of proximal goal with more distant goals. There are relationships in there, spaces, physical, intellectual, psychological, context, resources, affordances, and the people themselves bring so much to that ecology. So there's people embedded in their environment trying to achieve the things that they need to achieve through that process. One way of looking at creativity is it's the ability to see affordance, to perceive affordance in a situation, a thing, and then to have the will to be able to act on that, and then to actually engage with it in some way. So I am really interested to see how many of you would then recognize this as a sort of something that you can work with when you're looking at how creativity emerges in your environments. So I started with the idea that creating social structures and animating them is a really important thing to do in order to enable people to contribute their understandings and develop a bigger and deeper understanding of what creativity means in a particular context. So this is a project which a Creative Academic is facilitating at the moment, and some of you here today are already have already signed up for it. It's a year-long project. We're going to try and facilitate a number of conversations, online conversations. We have a Google Plus platform, which we'll use as our basic platform. We've tried to attract people who are interested, and we've so far got about 50 people who are interested. We're trying to bring together practitioners and researchers and people from different phases of education, people from outside education, exactly in the way that you're doing today, because that diversity is something that really is important when you're trying to open up conversations about creativity. We have a mechanism for curating what we learn. We have a magazine, which is an emergent magazine, so we publish articles as they arrive, rather than saying we're going to do stuff at the end. As something comes forward that we think is worth talking about, then we publish it through the magazine. We have mechanisms for trying to get student involvement in this, on online surveys for staff and students. And we're also going to do a program of institutional workshops and try and get face-to-face interactions on the ground. Ultimately, maybe there'll be a book coming out of this. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a book, because we will curate as we go in these other ways, and maybe a conference. So in a sense, that's an attempt to create one of these social structures and animate it with the people who care about these problems in order to learn what creativity means. So those are the links again, and there's an open invitation to all of you here. If you feel there's something there that's worth getting involved with, then please come along, sign up. There's just a link there, and sign up, and let's see where it takes us. Thank you.
Thank you.